Today I have a special guest on the show, my oldest daughter, Sage, who turned 18 in March and is finishing up her last year in 4-H. We talk about the lessons she's learned raising livestock, how it has affected her and her life view, and the way it opens communication as we work together. And she even has a bit of advice for parents who want to give their kids the same experience. This is part 1 of 2, and the second part will air next week. You don't want to miss this. Hey friends, welcome to the Get Goatwise podcast. Are you longing to raise goats and other animals for food but don't know where to start? Do you want to be more self-sufficient and less dependent on the grocery store? Do you wish you had a mentor to walk you through raising livestock? Hi, I'm Millie, animal scientist, cattle girl turned goat rancher, co-owner of Dry Creek Livestock, and simple living enthusiast. For 15 years, I've been on a mission to raise all of our own meat, eggs, and dairy. Here, we'll talk about raising goats and other homestead livestock, how to create sustainable animal management systems that actually work, and a bit of off-grid life with kids and livestock. If you're ready to take control of your food supply, raise livestock with confidence, and provide your family with the most nourishing meat, eggs, and dairy available, you're in the right place. Kick off your muck boots, pour a cup of coffee, and let's talk livestock. Hey friend, do you want to hang out with like-minded folks who are also interested in raising their own livestock and seeking self-sufficiency? Inside the free Raising Goats and Homestead Livestock community, you'll get tips on raising goats and other livestock and ideas to increase your self-sufficiency. Join now at bit.ly/getgoatwisecommunity. You can also become an insider and get weekly emails from me with the latest podcast episode, tips on raising goats and other livestock, real-life information about self-sufficiency and living off-grid, and early bird access to special offers. Sign up at bit.ly/getgoatwiseinsider. On to the interview. Hey Sage, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Why don't you just tell everybody a little bit about yourself? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? Things that interest you? Stuff like that.
I have grown up in Woodruff, Utah. I grew up riding horses. I've been riding since I was 8 years old. I did horse 4-H for several years, along with 4-H livestock, showing hogs mainly, and then switching back and forth between lambs and goats. And I've also started on steers this year, and I've shown chickens a couple times too.
Great. What else do you like to do in your free time?
I build cinches. I have a little cinch business where I build custom mohair and alpaca cinches. I like to play guitar a little bit.
Great, I love that. Sage, how did you get started in livestock 4-H your first year?
So a couple years before I started, I bought chickens and I started selling eggs. And I did that for 2 years, saving up money to buy my first hog.
How old were you when you did that?
See, 2 years before I started 4-H, so I would have been 7.
All right, great. So did you have enough to pay for your entire hog project your first year?
I bought my hog, but then my parents bought the feed, and after I sold my hog at the end of the show season, I paid them back.
How much work, time, and effort do you put into your 4-H projects? How much time do they take?
A lot of time. With the 4-H hogs, I try to walk them twice a day if I can, at least once a day, if not twice. Skin condition them, gotta clip them, and you do this for, you get them March, April, somewhere in there, and our county fair's in August, so that's 4 to 5 months.
And you've been pretty successful with hogs. I know you don't want to brag about this, but you've been pretty successful. Tell me about that, and then we'll go back to the other species.
So I've won hog showmanship for 9 years. The 1 year I didn't win it, I got second place. And then I have had a reserve champion market hog 3 years in a row, I believe.
So why do you think, I know we've always put a lot of emphasis on showmanship. Why do you think you've been so successful in showmanship?
Probably mostly the time and effort that I put in and the practice and asking other people for help.
Right.
I think that's one of the biggest things is if you ask people who know better than you, if you hang out with them and get to know them, ask them the questions, they will make you a better showman. They will teach you how to be a better showman.
Right. Now, in the show world, we both know there's some people that are not very willing to help, but for the most part, people are pretty willing when you ask.
Yeah. You just got to ask. Because that can be something some people may struggle with. Their pride, they may not want to ask help. And I think that's a good one to learn, is just be willing to ask help.
Right. So when we first started with hogs, I had a little bit of hog background. I hadn't shown hogs myself, but I had worked with other 4-H kids before I had my own kids. And we did, how many years did I kind of guide you through before you reached, I didn't have any more I could teach you?
I think it was 3
or 4 years.
3.5 to 4 years.
Yeah. And then at that point, we knew that we needed to go get outside help because it was beyond my skill level at that point.
Yeah.
And that was when things you got really good, like really exploded. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, let's go back to lambs. I know you love your lambs. Let's talk about lambs.
They can be a little tough sometimes. They're not as smart as goats, so they can be a little bit difficult in some parts to train. They also like to take advantage of you if you have the chance, and it's hard when you're smaller. If you're a beginner, a junior, like 9 to 12 years old, that's a little bit harder because they're so much bigger than you 9 times out of 10.
What is their sneaky maneuver?
They'll jump on you sometimes, or they'll duck their head and get out of your grip, I think is one of the more common ways that they do. They'll back up, too. They like to back up.
Yeah, and once they do it,
they're going to get in a habit of doing it a lot more.
It's just going to be a problem.
It's hard to train it out of them.
Right. So why do you love the lambs? I mean, so we showed goats for a couple of years. You showed goats for a couple of years. The other kids still do. You don't. Why do you prefer the lambs over the goats?
I don't know. I think it's just, I personally just like them better. They're easier to exercise. I did find that. They're a lot easier to make them run for exercise.
What about the fitting?
They're very fun to fit. There's no adhesive involved. Because with goats, you need adhesive, and then you need the oil to get it out, and then you got to wash the oil out. And that gets old after a little while, so the boot wool on the lambs is a lot of fun to blend and a lot of fun to fit.
Awesome. I love that. So when you showed goats, you did well.
I did all right. I think I won showmanship both years that I did it.
Yeah.
And then we went to a couple jackpots, and I think I got reserve champion at 1 or 2 of them.
Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, that was a fun year. So just to be really clear, I want to explain to the listeners that in our county, in our fair, we can only show 2 species. So if you want to do a different species, you have to drop one if you're already doing 2. So you started out doing hogs your first year, then you did hogs and lambs, and then when we started raising breeding goats, you dropped lambs and did goats for 2 years. So you did hogs and goats for 2 years. Then you went back to lambs.
Yep.
Now this year where you're doing steers, how is that working?
So I have a hog for county fair, and then I have a commercial cattle project, a commercial steer, and then a club calf for county fair as well. And then I have a lamb for state fair.
Great. And those 2 beef projects, they're 2 separate projects. So one only counts, only one can be sold in the sale. So technically in the 4-H market program, you have a market hog and a market steer. And then the second steer is in the commercial cattle project, which is different.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell about the steers this year, because this has been something you have wanted to do for as long as I can remember. This is your 10th year in 4-H. And I remember it may have been like your first or second year. You're like, Mom, I want to do a steer. And I'm like, no.
I think when you asked me what I wanted to show, I said steers, and you're like, no.
No. And why? There was a reason behind that. We just didn't have the space. We were in town. We didn't have the space. We didn't have the resources. It just was not going to work for us. So when we moved out here and got to where we had the space, we held off 1 year because we didn't have the barn finished. We didn't have adequate shelter. And are you glad we did?
Yes.
Because what was that winter like?
It was not good. It was really bad.
That was one of the worst winters I have ever seen in this area in my 48 years of life. We had so much snow, and it just kept coming and coming and coming, and it would have been a disaster. So I'm glad we didn't also. But this year has been so fun. So let's talk about the steers and maybe even when we got the steers and how that worked and how you did that financially.
So with the money I saved up from doing my past 4-H projects, I went and picked my commercial calf. His name's Remington. And then we went on a road trip out to eastern Wyoming to get my club calf. That was a really fun road trip. I really enjoyed it.
So yeah, that was a fun road trip. Sage and I did that together. We went out to Colorado and dropped off a load of goats, and then we headed up into Wyoming to pick up her steer. And how was that trip home, Sage, with the steer?
Interesting. He would jump at you, and he tore the divider panel out of the trailer. By the time we got to Rawlins, he had torn out the divider panel. We had to strap it around so it wasn't swinging and ruining the hinges, and then we also tied the door shut in case he decided to take the door too.
So he was a little bit wild.
You'd look at him in the trailer and he'd jump at you.
Yeah, I was a little nervous. Okay, I was a lot nervous when we brought him home. I was
was
like, we just bought a dragon.
mean.
What are we going to do? But we got some help. We got some really good help. Mm-hmm. And like we said with the hogs, same kind of thing. We found people that would help us with this before we ever started.
Yes.
And that has just been a total game changer. So talk about halter breaking the steer and getting past his dragon phase.
Diesel, my calf from Wyoming, he was not quite as bad to halter train as my commercial steer, Remington. He threw a bigger fit, and it took a few tries to actually get him to sit still and not just hang on the halter. It surprised me because I thought that Diesel would throw an absolute fit, but he picked a little bit of a fight, but after that he just stood there really quietly as I brushed him. Remington, on the other hand, he would flip over and kind of just fight the halter, and it took probably 3 days of haltering them for 30 minutes just to get him to sit still and not fight it.
Right, and who helped you with your haltering method?
Jared Briggs helped me with it, and it worked wonders for training them to lead and keeping their head up. He did a really good job helping me out with that.
Yeah, he just kind of guided us through that whole first part, every step of the way, made sure we were doing what needed to be done at the time it needed to be done. And it was a halter training method like I have never seen with steers. It was actually more like what you would use breaking colts, right?
A little bit, except for you side them, colts, you don't want to tie them solid, but because then they might really hurt themselves. But the steers, you can tie them solid and not.
Well, and just in the beginning, just getting that halter on them in the first place, just getting to where you could get to them to get the halter on them.
Yeah.
That was a lot like horse training. I thought it was really brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was neat.
Great. I love that. As we've gone on and you've got the steer halter broke, we've been, feed, we've been kind of dialing in feed, and we're talking to Jared. Mm-hmm. And we're also talking to
Jace Roethlisberger.
Yeah. And he's been great help.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about Jace and his involvement and how much he's helped you.
Jace has helped a lot with feeding them. He knows how to feed a steer really well. And the fitting, he knows how to fit really well too. Showmanship too. He has really helped me a lot with the steer showmanship because I don't know steer showmanship like I do lambs and hogs, but he has taken the time to help teach me how to show a steer really well.
Right, and while we're doing this project, especially here at the end, monitoring their feed and their weight and everything else, so we've been weighing once a week. And then we send the weights to Jared and Jace, and they give us guidance from that. And they're like, sometimes they need a picture. Sometimes they're like, we're right on track. So it's been fun to kind of see where we're going. So for the last month, as we're dialing in for fair, what has the steer's life been like? What do they do every day?
They stand tied up in the barn in the shade, trying to keep them cool. I try and wash them every day. It doesn't get done every single day, but I try really hard to. And then I spray them with a product called Revive, and it conditions their hair, and then I give them fly spray. Or I spray fly spray on them, and it keeps the flies off of them while they're sitting in the barn, just keeping cool and just trying to get their hair to grow and make them fluffy and make their hair really thick and long.
Yeah, it helps keep them comfortable too because they're both black steers. So our sun at 7,000 feet is really intense, and that can really affect them. So where are they? They're not in the barn all the time.
Evenings, I do turn them out in the evening when it's cool.
Great. Okay, now we've talked about the projects. I want to talk about, how do you think that being raised with livestock has affected you as a person? Like, what life skills have you learned? What things have you learned from raising livestock that you don't think you would have learned otherwise?
Probably most of the life lessons I do know. Your basic hard work. Life isn't fair. Animals do die. Sometimes you don't sell as well as you'd like to. The memories you do make, though, are amazing, and the friends you get to make along the way.
It's interesting that you say that you've learned life isn't fair in the livestock program. I love that. I think it's a lesson that everybody needs to learn. Mm-hmm. Why don't you talk about what happened with your pig last year?
That one was interesting. Really sweet pig. She was a fairly decent hog too, as far as being a market hog.
Yeah, we were excited about how she would do in market. She looked really good.
She had a vaginal prolapse, and we stitched it up on our own once, and it didn't work. It did rip out, and she started prolapsing again. We took her to the vet. He stitched her up. It ripped out as well. So we finally got her spayed, because she'd go into heat basically and just kept prolapsing. We got her spayed, spent the money on the vet bills to get her spayed, and then she was doing great, healthy. I walked her, and then 2 weeks before fair, she died.
And that was devastating.
Yeah.
Because she was doing so good. She didn't give any indication that anything was wrong, or there was a complication from the surgery. And so she had lived, I think, 6 weeks after the surgery.
Yes, I believe so.
It's so fun to hear Sage's perspective on things. The second half of her interview will air next week, but in the meantime, I'll be posting county fair updates on the ranch Instagram at dry.creek.livestock. Be sure to come back next week for the rest of the interview. If you have any questions for Sage, head on over to the free community and post a question, and I'll get her in there to answer. Hey there, thanks for listening today. I'm so glad you're here. If this episode helped you or encouraged you in some way, share the link with your homesteading friends. And if you really want to help me out, click on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and a review. You can connect with me on Instagram or email linked in the show notes, and meet me back here soon for more Get Goat Wise.